I can go pretty deep into Cush because I think, like you said, he was pivotal in a lot of ways. And he had a lot of mythology named after him, like Mercury. A lot of the father gods that we get in mythology came from Cush. There's some wild stories. Did you ever hear this where on the ark, Ham's wife was already pregnant with Cush and he wanted her aboard anyhow? And Noah said, no, I don't want anybody who's pregnant. He snuck her aboard. And what they say was Shamhazi, the leader of the Watchers, supposedly impregnated his wife because even the serpent wanted to try to pass his seed aboard the ark because they know that they were never going to make it over through the flood.
I think we all get the feeling that something just isn't right in the world. Welcome, fellow foilers, to the Tin Foil Hat Club, where we dare to discuss all the things we don't talk about in church. And where yesterday's fiction becomes tomorrow's fact.
When you've got a government that's lying to your face, controlling the information through the media that it owns, that's not a recipe for peace in a civilization.
Atomic. The electromagnetic waves affecting our planet.
Megalithic cyclopean sites.
Anderson Cooper, intern for the CIA.
Watchers in the days of Noah.
Well, hello and welcome to the Tinfoil Hat Club. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Ben.
And thank you for joining us yet again. We have a fantastic show planned for you today, but as always, first, just a couple quick housekeeping procedures before we get rolling with today's show and guest. So first of all, if you are joining us live, thank you so much. We always appreciate when you guys join us live. We can see all of your chats coming in through the feed here. So if you're on Rumble joining us, you're on YouTube, or you're watching through our website, the TFHC.com, we can see all of your chats coming in. So thank you for joining us, and we always enjoy having you guys be a part of the show.
Yeah.
If you are actually listening to this down the line, then you're listening to a normal edited podcast release, and that is perfectly fine as well. We appreciate that as well. Either way, if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please feel free to share a comment. We always like to see those and help drive that algorithm to reach more and more people. And if you are listening to this on some kind of service, then please, if you feel like we've earned it, please leave us a review and a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you are listening to us. That also helps us out tremendously and helps continue to drive the show and push it to more and more people. So thank you guys very much for your help with that. When you head over to our website, the TFHC.com, if you guys would be so kind while you're over there to actually fill out the pop-up box that appears. That is actually going to get you signed up for our newsletter so we can get you all of the weekly content that we have planned, what live streams we have coming out, what episodes are coming out, and everything we have going on the foil. So please just make sure you guys are filling that out while you're over there. We will also invite you to our private Facebook fans group, and then we will send you a 20% off coupon to use for your first purchase in the merch store, is our way of saying thank you. So we would love to have you be a newsletter subscriber to the show. And if you want to go one further, we would love for you to be a member to the show. So we do have a couple different membership tiers. If you actually want to head to our membership website directly, it's the TFHC.supercast.com. You can also find a link to that through our website, the TFHC.com, if you click on members. So again, we have several different plans you can choose from, starting at $5 a month and going up all the way to $9, which is our HD Foiler membership. That is going to unlock everything, including HD only shows that only those members can actually get access to, albeit on the live stream or the regular releases. So we would love to have you guys help support the show and become a member. And ultimately, whenever you guys buy merch in the merch store or you become a member to the show or whatever the case is, ultimately you are helping support Ben and I and our ministry to reach the lost for God. So thank you guys very much for that. We do have some active sales going on right now. You guys saw it in the countdown if you guys were there present for that while it was running. We do have a sale right now on all of our obfuscated tees and sweatshirts. So if you guys want to head over to the store and use code disclosure at checkout, you will get 20% off your tees and your sweatshirts. So head over to our merch store, the TFHC.com/merch, or click on merch when you head over to our website, the TFHC.com, either way, and you will get access to the merch in the merch store. All right. As always, you can follow us on all of our social media as well, Facebook, Twitter, or X, I guess the kids are calling it these days, Instagram, and obviously all of our social media on YouTube and Rumble. So we would appreciate you guys following us on there and keeping an eye on things that we have going on. So we would really appreciate that. All right. Without further ado, we will go ahead and bring in our guest. I will unmute him and shrink us down here to bring him in. And our guest today is Brett Lee Thomas. So Brett is actually an author, and he has done a ton of really great research into Mystery Babylon. So that time frame right there around all of those events. And that's kind of what we're going to dive into today with Brett. He is actually friends with Zen Garcia and is publishing through Zen's Sacred Word Publishing company. So you can actually find out more about Brett. If you want to learn more about him directly, you can actually head to his website, which is mysterybabylon.com. So we're looking forward to a great discussion today, getting into the events right after the flood, or a little bit after the flood, I guess, as we have Nimrod and we've got Babylon and we've got all kinds of things that are basically going south after the flood, even though God tried to reboot us and we just couldn't help ourselves. So Brett, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate you joining us and great to have you on the show.
Thank you both for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Very humble.
Absolutely. So, just to start off today, like we talked about a little bit before we hit record, it's always good for everybody to get to know you and just share with us, a little bit of your background. What got you interested in these topics? And as you started to dive into all this stuff, what was kind of the driving force behind that?
I think I mentioned a little bit before when we talked before the show, and I said the passing of my father, just not to get too melodramatic, but I was on a quest to figure out what happened as far as his cancer, why he went down that path, why he was stressed, what happened. And I was writing, and I started writing. And as I was writing more and more, the questions that I found answers to, other questions opened up, and it just became more of a spiritual thing after a while. And I started to just delve into that. And eventually, that's where it took me. It took me down that road. And again, what you said, Kyle and Ben, about not having those feelings that something isn't quite right in your world, that's kind of how I felt, not only with my dad, but just with life in general. So that's why it ended up in the spiritual realm. And I just started writing more and getting more answers. And that's how it just developed into what it is today. Yeah. I didn't plan on this. It just happened.
God just grabbed you and took you, man.
Yeah. It's one of those things. Everybody has a purpose in life. And I just feel that just getting some answers is one of mine.
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit more kind of, I guess, from my perspective on my experience with the church, but what was yours? Were you brought up in the church? And
I was.
Was this kind of obviously you're having questions, it seems like, so it seems like you probably were. And it seems like you're kind of pushing against this to try to figure out because things aren't making sense to you. Is that kind of the gist?
Absolutely. When I was young, I remember I started in a Lutheran church and then I ended up in a Baptist church. And I always liked the preachers that were very, they would pound on the pound and say, hell is in your destiny if you don't do this, etc. I just felt there was some energy with that. And eventually over time, I saw that disappear. And it would just seem so politically correct. And it just seemed like the life was being drained out of churches now. And I just didn't really feel that I had a message there.
Yeah. Yeah, the fire and brimstone preaching, man. That's what we would call it back in the day, right? The
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of like we can't help, like, as human beings, and we're going to get into this today. Obviously, this is just the nature of everything we do that has sin attached to it. But it's hard for us to find that middle for the pendulum, right? We always swing it either so hard the one way where everything's sending you to hell, and everything is going to, send you to the fiery pits of the everlife. And then the other side of the coin is kind of like we talked about, like we've slid into this apathetic, everything is okay, God loves you, you don't have to change, kind of view of the church today, which is actually in essence driving more people to hell than ever. because there's no call for repentance at all. And it's almost like if you dare point out, how could you dare point out sin to someone? And it's just this very apathetic state that we've arrived into the church.
Yeah, it's almost like there was substance in those preachings and in those messages. And now there's really the substance is always about how God loves you and be generous and have hope.
Yeah.
Hope is like my 4-letter word with churches. I don't know. It's something that nobody can accomplish, and it's always dished out to them. And it's just almost like there's no substance with sermons anymore, really, with me. And that's why another reason I turned away.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense, man.
Yeah.
As you started to dive into this stuff, like what was the first thing that you remember? And obviously you've been working on books now for, like we talked about, like a decade plus, but what was kind of the first thing that you remember getting into where you're like, well, this is completely different than what I was taught?
I think it was the mark of Cain. That was one that I just had wondering. And of course, everybody wants to know, where did Cain get his wife? Those questions were just kind of getting to me. And I was just starting to wonder, what is the mark of Cain? And I even looked at some books that were, myths and deceptions of the Bible. I didn't care where I got my book, because every book can have some kind of information. You just have to look at and see where it might direct you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of these early books, I remember that was one of the first books I've gotten, and obviously it wasn't in a Christian mode, but it would have their opinions on what the mark of Cain was, for example, what happened and his sacrifice, etc. And you go from there. Sometimes you have to go even to see people who don't exactly care for God or want Christianity or like it, to see what their opinions is. And then you kind of go from there, and you can actually expand upon that and that, you can get help from many different sources.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely interesting. And I know for me, so this is probably just me asking through my lens, but we'll see what your experience was too. For me, Genesis 6 was a huge, huge thing, right? Once we figured out that, it's not like the church teacher. First of all, my experience was church didn't teach anything. They just avoided it like the plague, right? We didn't even discuss it. It was almost like, we would talk about eschatology and have 80 million different viewpoints on that, but they would not touch certain things in the Bible with a 10-foot pole, and Genesis 6 was one of them. Was that kind of one of the things right around that same time frame, I would assume, and then in Genesis, that was a draw point for you as well?
I think the serpent seed was a big one. And then that naturally, the Nephilim, that naturally brought you to Genesis 6. And it's the struggle between, sons of God actually being the sons of Seth or else something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the churches today and since the 4th century, they've been fanatical about dropping everything that has to do with giants or anything that has to do with any kind of these fornications. And it's just, you got to wonder why. Why are you so much into not allowing any of that information or that research in? What about the book of Enoch? It was found right with the rest of the books of the Bible and the Dead Sea Scrolls. Why exclude that one so much? Why not give it a chance? We've read in the book of Jude, even they've talked about, angels that kept not their first estate. And you got to wonder, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? It's so simple.
Yeah.
But it's deflected continually, like you said, Kyle.
Yeah. Was it Corinthians we were reading last week where we had the weird passage where Paul's just going and all of a sudden he drops in there about angels, make sure you cover your heads so you're not a temptation to the angels. Yeah. And we have all kinds of little Easter egg stuff like that makes no sense. It makes no sense. The only way that it makes sense is if you actually have the proper context of Genesis 6. Now, you had said something that I want to kind of dive into a little further, because as part of your research, what do you feel like is the reason or the rationale that in the 4th century we started to have this huge deviation away from the traditional,
Look, you want me to be totally upfront again.
Absolutely.
Pull no punches.
Fire away, brother.
When Rome became the Roman Church, is when they were going to incorporate some paganism into the church, because a lot of the people, of course, the Roman Empire was pagan before, and they're not going to want to easily change into a Christian belief. So I believe that the leaders, at the time, needed to just bring a little bit of Mary worship and a little bit of, the Immaculate Conception, etc. in there, and also the praying to the different saints. So that was one part of it. There's a few different reasons why that they had to get rid of the whole giant thought. And of course, the validity of the Bible is one thing, because they were going to push evolution. That was in the the last few hundred years or whatever. But that part that they're talking about is they needed to bring in the worship of all these different saints and praying to saints and stuff. And people would start to think, okay, well, wait a second. How can that be? You shouldn't be praying to any angels. And could there be angels that actually are on the earth that have sired children as well? That type of thing. I think that's what they wanted to incorporate the pagan religion into that all, so they can actually have like a hybrid belief in ways.
Going back to what do you think the mark of Cain was in your research?
That one's a tough one, because there's a whole bunch of different marks that could be. It could have been, some say it was the horn coming out of his head. Some say it was a taw or a T branded on his shoulder, possibly, or and it could be, let's say, dark skin is another one, which I don't believe. Yeah. I believe out of all of the things, see, when we talk about the horn on his head, okay, a lot of times people will take that literally, okay, and they'll think, oh, okay, well, did a horn grow out of his head and that was the mark? I believe that during my research for all these years, we have to kind of start to think that there's symbolism in a lot of these things. And when we talk about horns in the past, they often portray power, okay? When you see a two-horned God, okay, or let's say even that the picture that we have of the devil, it's got two horns, that's more of a superior God. When you have one-horned God, it would be more like his son or somebody that's not as bright, it's inferior, but it's still powerful. So when we have one horn, I believe that was actually the part of Cain actually becoming stronger and smarter. Okay, he had a lot more power than more than normal people. Okay, obviously, because I believe that the serpent pretty much sired him. Okay, so does that make sense? Because again, you have all these things like the taw that was branded on his shoulder, etc. You have all these things that don't make sense if you think about it. But when you look at like symbolism, then that makes sense. Cain did have a lot more, let's say, supernatural knowledge and wisdom, being who he was. And I think that was part of that horn of power. I think the mark of Cain, when it all boils down to it, and it's a tough one because there's a lot of different things, but I think it was a mark that was placed on everyone around him rather than him. And it's a way for him, in other words, other people were to look at him and not want to kill him, but more of just say, okay, God will deal with him. I'm going to leave him alone. I don't want to deal with it. Like in the past, I'm sure other people would really right off the bat want to take somebody out if they did something wrong. That's justice, right? Yeah. An eye for an eye. Okay. That's how it was in times past. But I believe to spare Cain's life, God said, okay, other people will look upon you now and just want to avoid you and tell you just to go away because you need to stay alive. He needed to stay alive to serve out his punishment. So the mark wasn't necessarily on him. He had some knowledge. He had a lot of things that he could utilize in his life, but the mark was basically on other people to say, this guy is marked. Don't kill him. He's almost like a mark of a slave or a servant. You keep him alive to think about what he did and live out the rest of his life like that. Yeah. Because there is you remember Lamech and that prophecy at where Cain had 7 generations where he had to kind of live and die on his own. Does that sound familiar? Yep. Remember where Lamech cried and he said he killed somebody and he said, oh, now 70 generations are going to suffer because of this. Do you remember? It's in the Bible. Yeah. So basically what I take from that is that actually Lamech ended up killing Cain on accident. Okay, because Cain was supposed to live out his life throughout the 7th generation, but he actually died. It's going way off the handles there. But what I'm saying is I think that the mark is the way people look at Cain.
Yeah.
and they were not supposed to actually kill him. And that was part of his punishment.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I get what you're putting down. I do.
Yeah, for anybody that out there, maybe that, I know we've got maybe some new people that are listening. Just for clarity, we are actually talking about in Genesis 4. It's the story of Cain and Abel, and it's at the end of this. So obviously, God has discovered what's happened. Cain's like, I can't stand the punishment. You're basically banishing me. And we pick up in verse 13, and I'll just read this to kind of give the back end for anybody that's kind of questioning what we're talking about. Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and wander on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who found him should attack him. So then Cain
I'm sorry, it's not glamorous. See, everybody wants this glamorous, it was a mark, and it was something on his head, or it was that some people even say that he had leprosy, he had a dog. There was all these different interpretations, and it's not the glamorous one. I'm sorry, but it's the only one that makes sense in the context of those verses that you just read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I was just I'd like to ask that because we watch Supernatural. I don't know if you ever seen that show.
We started to watch that. We haven't got far into it.
And
in the first episode.
Cain is in there eventually.
Oh, interesting.
And so one of them gets the mark of Cain. And it's just like a burn mark on his arm. And so then he lives forever. Like he can't kill him. But it's just like, it's interesting to how the like Supernatural in those shows, they pull a lot of this.
It is amazing how researched they are.
Yes. All of these things.
More than the church even.
Yes.
It's kind of insane.
And they went into a deeper dive with Cain, like almost for a whole series, for a whole season.
Interesting.
And the mark was something simple. It wasn't glamorous, but it was like, once you knew you had it, you couldn't get rid of it.
It almost makes me, obviously, when we get to the end of everything, we find out exactly what is the mark of the beast. I have a feeling that whatever that is going to be fairly reminiscent of maybe what was done to Cain, or some flip-flopped, weird, twisted version of it. You know what I mean? Because Satan is always a counterfeit of, what God is doing. But there's another interesting point to this, and I want to kind of keep reading. Because this is important for anyone who's here new and maybe didn't know what we were talking about. We also mentioned Enoch, and this is really important because this ties into what we talked about with Genesis 6. You mentioned Jude earlier, and in Jude specifically, I want to reference this verse, not from Jude, but from Genesis, which ties into Jude. That's very important. And so we have this mark that's been put on Cain. Then Cain, it says, Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. Okay. Now, this is not the same Enoch that we read about in the book of Enoch and also that Jude references. This was actually third generation. Okay. This Enoch is third generation. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after his son, Enoch. Now, I bring that up because in Jude, we can see very specifically, and I think Jude does this for this very reason. He actually prefaces by saying Enoch, the seventh from Adam, because that Enoch was actually seventh generation. There's also another Lamech. There are two Lamechs, two Enochs. And so just FYI for anyone listening to this, and you go read that, if you read in Jude and you see Enoch seventh from Adam, that is why Jude is saying that, because he's distinguishing very clearly between the Enoch we're talking about, Book of Enoch, and this particular Enoch, who is the son of Cain. So I just want to throw that out there.
To piggyback, Kyle, on what you just said a little bit ago, the reason when I do think what that mark is, it makes sense that the mark could still be around today, and people are using the mark today, which is kind of like a parallel from then to now, which is kind of scary if you think about it, because people today, if you think about it, they see sin, they see people doing bad things. A lot of people, a lot of good Christian people, good followers of God, but they ended up trying to just look away and think, no, I can't deal with them, right? I better not. I'm not going to get in their face. I'm not going to do whatever. And I guess that's the mark again. And I believe that it's still, people can take advantage of it who are on the wrong side of God, can still use that mark to intimidate others today. And I think that's a big part of why evil consists and continues.
No, that's good.
It's kind of like I said, it's not glamorous, but it makes sense when you think about what the punishment that God wanted to give Cain is, to not have anybody kill him. And how you do it is to have people not just avoid them and not want to do anything that they know is right and they know they should.
Yeah. It's interesting because as we go on here, obviously we have the other Lamech. So we have Lamech, who's the father of Noah, which would be 9th generation. And then we have Lamech, who is earlier, right? And this is actually in Genesis 4 as well. And he is the one who comes in and he says, I killed a man. And if anyone comes to seek revenge on me, if Cain's, revenge is 7-fold, then my revenge is 77-fold. Now, what do you make of that? Because that to me has always been kind of a strange, mysterious passage in here. And we kind of mentioned, obviously, his wives in here too. He's the first one that we know of that is engaged in polygamy. It's not the only time in the Bible that's happened, many other times. And it's not necessarily even bad because, again, we don't see anything bad with it until we get much further into the Bible. So what are some things that you pick out of here just for fun as we're taking this journey together?
And again, when I say things, I honestly, guys, they're going to be probably new and probably a lot of people haven't heard them because the research, like I said, I've done really a lot of research.
And Brett,
all the obscure
that is why you are here, my friend. Make everyone dive into their Bibles. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, that's all that. So that's why when I say things, they may not sound like the standard answers is because I've thought hard on these.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as what you're talking about is that 70 answer that Lamech is saying in the Bible. I believe that what they meant was, as God is the first generation in Adam, you go down to the 7th generation would have been Lamech, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I believe that just kind of at my conclusion is around the time of the flood, things are going to get so bad that the Savior might have been actually going to come about there at the 7th generation, and the Messiah to crush the serpent's head.
Mm-hmm.
But since God is a perfect God, he needs to have all of his promises fulfilled. And Cain was supposed to live to that 7th generation and die on his own, but he didn't. So somebody took him out, and there we go again. We go back to that mark of Cain. We're not supposed to take him out. You're supposed to let him live and leave him alone, right? He's supposed to go to the land of Nod and wander, but he was taken out by one of his descendants, Lamech. So Lamech probably knew of this prophecy, and he wailed, and he had that, they call it Song of the Sword, and he cried, and he says, I killed somebody, which they interpreted as he was getting blind, and he had a child that was telling him where to point his arrows, okay, because he was hunting game. So I guess Cain had a shudder to him. One of his punishments was that he had a very bad nervous shuddering, and when he walk around, he'd be very nervous. That's probably why he put people in the cities, is because he's afraid somebody was going to take him out. We go back, there's the mark again. So he had this shudder. So the child that was with Lamech pointed out, because Cain was coming to see him, and Lamech shot an arrow and thought it was an animal because he was probably coming to a bushes or whatever, and he actually shot Cain dead. So as Lamech was so upset about that, he crashed his hands together and he killed the little child, the little person that was helping him hunt. So that's why he said he was so despondent, but he killed one for his hurt and his other for his wounding. In other words, when he was saying he was wounding, that means he was blind. So then he freaked out, is because he knew that there was a punishment of 70 more generations that Cain and his descendants would have to live and suffer until the Messiah came. And I guess I read something where it's actually, if you can count down 70 generations since that time is the time the real Messiah came, and that was Jesus.
I believe I've done this. I came across this too when I was doing some research, and it was around in the book of Enoch. It talks about how you will be locked up for 70 generations, talking about the Watchers. And I was like, man, that's a very specific, interesting time, right? God doesn't provide specifics like that unless we're doing it for a reason. And I can't remember if you start with Jared, which is also 7th generation, because Jared was Enoch's father, proper Enoch. Because Enoch was eighth generation. Is that right? I think 6, 7, somewhere in there. And I can't remember if you go from Jared or if you go from Enoch, and then you look at Christ's lineage forward when you put people in that are supposed to be there. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge for Luke's account. You actually get to Christ after 70 generations.
Yeah. That's what again, the research too, that's what I found too. And that's kind of frightening, because if you think about it, there may have needed to be a reason that they had to postpone it so long, almost 2,000 years, is because of God. Like I said, God, when he says something, has to come through, or else it has to be handled.
Yeah. Is it the book of Jasher where the story resides, where they're very much to what you said, where they're out hunting together, and Tubal-Cain is actually the one that shoots Cain? Yeah, with a bow, because they're hunting game, and accidentally shooting.
Tubal-Cain, he was supposedly the child. Yeah. And I don't know if he died at some say that he died at that time, but I don't think Tubal-Cain died. I think he grew up, and he was the one that mastered the metallurgy, metal arts, etc. later on.
Yeah, I think it talks about that in here, and then his brother was the one that was the Jabal was the one who was the
music.
Yes, I think he was music. That's somewhere in there too. But then he was also a husbandman, like livestock and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there was livestock. 2 of them, Jabal and Jubal, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Jabal and Jubal. Jabal and Jubal. Wow.
I know.
Yeah, easy for me to say, right? And then it goes into Zillah, she bore Tubal-Cain, and so on and so forth. But it's kind of an interesting passage.
Yeah, Jasher goes into really deep detail of that account.
Yeah,
I remember reading that, and I was just like,
seeing Jubilees is just like, his house fell on him and he died.
It's more than just like the 2 women. One was pretty much for pleasure, and one was for having kids.
Oh, okay.
Because they gave them a potion so they wouldn't get pregnant.
Oh, yeah. I do recall some of this too, because that was one of the things that was kind of.
And so it was like, when I read that, I'm like, wow, they were doing that back then.
Yeah.
And Maria, my wife, she goes, they do it today.
Nice.
New ways to commit the same old sins, Ben. Like you say all the time.
And so I read that, and I'm like, okay, well, this makes Genesis, and make a lot more sense. And then Jubilee says his house fell on him.
Yeah, it does.
And either way,
and I don't think it's being metaphorical there. I think it's actually saying that his house literally fell on him, because it talks about how the stones crushed him to death.
Yeah.
And because the reason for that was because he killed Abel with a stone.
Yeah.
And so God basically justified or made his end the same with a stone.
But I mean,
who knows, right?
No matter which way you look at it, it's kind of fascinating.
It is fascinating.
His house did fall on him.
Yeah.
I mean,
either way, right?
Either way, his house fell on him.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating when you get into some of these other accounts, who's to say which one's right, which one's not. But
yeah, kind of like the piggyback on what you're saying too, that makes sense. And we could go metaphorically, or we could go that where if you do think that his house, like you might have been alluding to then about his family, his house, his family did fall on him, like you were saying, and maybe it was a violent manner, because if you use those rocks as another symbol of violence, because of how he killed Abel, there was a violent act that came upon Cain.
Yeah.
So it could be a lot of symbolism there too.
And maybe they wounded him with the arrow and polished him off with a rock. The coup de grace. Congratulations. We're going to have to hit you in the face with a rock now until you're not here, because you're not going to make it.
Maybe he still thought he was an animal.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So I mean, we had intended to get into Genesis today, but this is a good conversation. But kind of fast forward now, we're going to kind of get to. So there's your first 30-minute sampler session of probably future conversations more in Genesis, right? With Brett, okay. But we fast forward now, we have the flood, because we have everything that happens after that. We have the Genesis 6 event. Things are getting horrific. We wipe everything clean, and we're starting over, and we come off the boat, and it doesn't take long before man's up to his same old tricks yet again. And we wind up all the way at the Tower of Babel event. We have Nimrod that comes to power, and we have this whole thing. So as you started diving into the post-flood world, right, what did you find where the train started coming off the tracks?
That's a good question. A good question. It's a huge story, and something, like I said, a lot of people may not quite understand is, from what my research found, is Nimrod was actually on the side of God for a while. God called him to actually do a little bit of enforcing, because God called Noah first off to say, okay, let's distribute people. Let's bring them to different areas so there won't be, I mean, again, it's some advantages we have of being close to each other as far as people would be, you can trade, you can get help, you can fighting wild animals, etc. But God wanted people to spread out because the potential for overcrowding and aggression, etc., was already starting. Okay. And I guess against the sons of Japheth, and the sons of Ham with Shem. They were actually starting to battle with each other. Okay. So Nimrod was actually one of the ones that God called, I believe, to shine for him, to be a viceroy at the beginning. And he was actually going into battle against the Japhethonites, the sons of Japheth. And Cush, his father, he was already of a bad intent. Okay, he was just not going down the right way, and of course, Ham was helping him go down these pagan paths. Because I don't know if you guys probably know about where Ham inscribed a lot of the antediluvian formulas and magic to those tablets or to those things.
No, I'm not familiar with this. Dive into that, please.
Well, they say that Ham always had a little bit of a issue with Noah and with obeying and following God. So basically the flood was coming. So Ham was thought to have inscribed a lot of this antediluvian magic and incantations and all these things that he could use later, because he was into that. So it wouldn't be lost forever. So after the flood,
the watcher knowledge, basically, right?
Pretty much, yeah, a lot of that stuff. Yeah, he helped put that away, and then when the flood was over, then he went and grabbed it himself. Kind of like the fabric of Adam, like that. You've heard about that, the fabric of Adam, where he wore that, and Ham stole it from Noah. Mm-hmm. He was a little bit nefarious, and then he gave it to Cush, and Cush eventually gave it to Nimrod, right? Mm-hmm. So Nimrod, again, used that just like Adam did to make animals prostrate and to kneel down and work with people too. It just stopped people. And I think Nimrod, although he was trying to do good at first, he was very young. He was about 20 or so when he got those, the garments of Adam, when he was about 20, but he was using those for good. And he was basically fighting some wars because these people were not separating like Noah wanted them. Noah wanted them to go out each to his own area, to Asia, to Africa, but they just didn't want to. A lot of them didn't want to, and there was fighting. So I think when the wheels started to come off was that Nimrod starting to get a little pride because Cush, his father, was whispering in his ear to go down another path, the pagan path. And he was struggling. He started struggling with that. And he started to do things his own way. Like he was preaching to the people that, this is an invisible God here. Okay, you have to trust that there is an invisible God. And he is the one that is he caused the flood. And he is the one that you should be respecting now. But the people are starting to they're grumbling, and they started to say, well, we want something that we can see. We want a visual. Can you get something? And he started, constructing idols and stuff. Again, he started falling for what they wanted. And that was the time when the wheels started falling off, is when Nimrod's heart started changing, but the people still stuck with him.
Yeah. One of the ones that I haven't been able to dig into a whole lot yet is actually Cush. And because he seems to, as I dig more and more in there, and Ham's whole line is just corrupt from top to bottom. I mean, you got, one of his sons, and a lot of people don't even know this. We kind of glaze right past this in the Bible, but the whole land of Egypt is named after him. I mean, that's how we get the name Egypt. That was one of his sons. But Cush specifically seems to be kind of an interesting character in all this. So what was some of your research around him specifically that he was doing? I guess more than what we maybe talked about, but
I can go really pretty deep into Cush because I think, like you said, he was pivotal in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of mythology named after him, like Mercury. A lot of the father gods that we get in mythology came from Cush, basically. There's some wild stories that actually, did you ever hear this where on the ark, Ham's wife was already pregnant with Cush, and he wanted her aboard anyhow, and Noah said, "No, I don't want anybody who's pregnant." But Noah didn't really know, but he snuck her aboard, and she was actually the mother of Cush.
Oh, Ham.
And Cush.
Ham's wife.
Well, I don't
basically.
even know. What they say was Shamhazi, the leader of the Watchers.
Oh yeah.
Supposedly impregnated his wife.
What's the? Do you remember what this is from? Like what book?
Oh, I could find it for you. That's
I know you've been like Zen. You guys have been in a lot of books. It's hard to kind of keep track.
Yeah,
of
I'll send it to you for sure. Yeah. I'll send you where I found it because it's in my book somewhere, and I try to footnote it big time.
You do.
I'll find it for you. But it said that she was already impregnated, obviously, and because even the serpent wanted to try to pass his seed aboard the ark, because they know that they were never going to make it through the flood. And either Shamhazi and none of the Watchers were going to make it either. That descendant, the 200 Watchers, they were not going to make it through the flood. So they did whatever they could to pass out their seed. So like I said, these stories say that actually Cush was that child. And Ham took it upon himself to make him seem like his own. So he was already technically a bad seed already.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's part of what Cush did at first. Okay. He wanted to follow in Ham's footsteps. And obviously he just did not have a good bloodline to begin with.
Yeah. I'm going to throw this comment from Sherry up here, and I want to just make a statement about this. So Sherry actually said she had never heard that about Ham's wife being pregnant on the ark. Now, Sherry and everybody else watching, there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, spitballing that we're doing today about some stuff that, is in a lot of extra biblical texts. There's 80 gazillion extra biblical texts out there, guys. And it is really going to be the discernment of every individual to figure out for themselves maybe what is and what is not good. And I would always encourage anyone to, if you read it and it goes against the, what's in the Bible, then probably not so good. If it's directly contrary, but if, that's always going to be your litmus test. So this is not something that you're going to get specifically in the Bible. And you have to remember that one of the things with Genesis, and this is the difficult part for us as we sit in 2025, we've talked about this on the show many times. The account that we have in Genesis, one, is very Cliff Notes style version. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's because you got to think it's recalling this story to people who are really probably much, much more familiar with it already than we are. So it's kind of like, I always use the analogy of if you go on to watch your favorite TV show and before the newest episode, you get into the newest episode, it says last time on blah, 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 blah. And it gives you kind of the quick rundown of everything. Imagine Genesis is that quick rundown of everything. So for us sitting here in 2025 that don't have all of the detailed knowledge that they had back then when this was written, however many BC, it's very difficult for us. So that's why we have to get into some of the extra biblical texts that kind of, and the lore, if you will, that does shed potentially more light on some of these. The difficult part is what part of the lore is good and what part of the lore isn't good, because you'll get conflicting things. Like we just had conflicting things earlier, potentially, where we see that in the book of Jasher, we have this event with Tubal-Cain, and he kills, he's with Lamech, and Lamech accidentally kills Cain, and so on and so forth. And then you go into the book of Jubilees, and maybe it's being more metaphorical, or maybe it's being more literal, and it just says his house fell in on him and he got crushed by the stones. So there's a lot of these things out there that you just kind of have to read and really have discernment on, and ultimately take back to your Bible and just say, well, how does this fit into what we see in the Bible? So I know it's a long-winded expose there, but I feel like it's really important, especially with the conversations we're getting into today.
That's very good. Again, I do go to very obscure sources that almost anything I could find, I either grab, buy, download, whatever I can do. So that's why, again, there's an answer somewhere, and it doesn't hurt, because that's all we have left is these ancient texts. I did find something, actually. I did a little searching here, and I did find something that might help out with that answer. Let's see if I can find it again. I just found it. It said, the book that I found it off of was called Hebrew Myths, the Book of Genesis. And that's just, it's from Robert Graves is his name, and Raphael Patai. Okay, it's just a book. Okay, and it basically, in the quote that I have here, it says, and they're talking about Ham. Had he not, what basically this woman, his wife, another story that I found in the ark is that Noah strewn, it was like seeds or something on the floor, okay? Because he said to the occupants of the ark, there'll be no sexual relations aboard the ark, because during this time of sadness, we don't want anybody to have enjoyment or have fun. We just don't want it. It's a solemn time. It's supposed to be a solemn time because people are dying, right?
Yeah.
So Noah did not want anybody to have any of that. So he had the men stay on one side, the women stay on the other side, and he threw like seeds or whatever it was, stalks or something. So if anybody would try to walk from one side to the other, they would see the footprints. Okay,
it's like the broken glass.
That's why he did that. Yes. So Ham was in a predicament because she was going to start showing. Okay. So he actually did that. He walked across and acted like he had intercourse, whatever, with her at that time. So then he could actually get away with her being,
it was his.
Right. And you can say that it was his. And so of course, that was one of the things that Noah was really upset at him about. Another thing that he was upset at Ham about is because Ham wanted all the his inheritance split in 3 ways, not 4. Because when Noah was off the ark, he wanted to have another child, and that's part of that whole debacle with castration or whatever you might hear about Noah. But Ham had some deceivious, he was deceivious there in some certain ways. So this book says, had he not lain with her himself, Shem and Japheth would have known she was already bearing a child. So that's the quote I got from that. So from that book, probably you'll be able to see that story in there.
Yeah.
Let you know.
Go ahead.
I want to go back to the castration.
One thing before you do, we kind of see some of this even in House of David. We've talked about this last few weeks, but if anybody watched House of David, have you started watching House of David yet?
No, and I haven't.
You need to get on that. They actually pull from a lot of Jewish lore, because there's 80 million different things out there, like we've said. They actually pull from a lot of Jewish lore that goes back really far about who David's mom, the relationship basically between Jesse, his father, and David's mother. And they actually portray him in the show as being conceived out of wedlock. And a lot of the Jewish lore, where they didn't just pull it out of thin air, is what I'm getting at. They actually went back and actually pulled this out of old Jewish lore. Now, do we see anything in the Bible about that? No, it doesn't get into it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong either. There's just, the Bible can't cover everything, right? And it talks about the things that are important and then kind of goes from there. So anyway, castration thing.
Yeah, you just kind of
on with the castration.
Yeah, because I've never heard that.
Or should
before.
I say off with the castration?
I never heard that. So like, hey, what's
the
that?
castration?
Yeah.
Oh my. Okay.
Believe me, I've heard a lot of things. So this is like news to me. This is.
You mean of Noah?
Yeah. So.
Okay. Yeah. And there's so many things, but as you look at these stories, they start to make sense in a scary way. And that's why what I write and what I research and what I put in these is I try to make it sound logical and make sense. One of the things that makes sense to me is that I heard a story about what got Noah drunk was actually some of the grapes that came out of the Garden of Eden.
I've heard
You've heard about that, right?
Yeah.
So that makes sense, because if it's so potent and it's not the greatest thing, if that was maybe the tree of the knowledge, the grape that he took out and he drank and he thought he could make a wine out of it, but it was so strong that it intoxicated him, that makes sense to me, because I don't picture Noah as being incompetent or not aware of his surroundings. I think, that would be something that would take him by surprise, right? So then we have Ham, because Noah was getting old and he wanted another child to help him in his old age. And Ham did not particularly like that, because he's thinking, okay, well, you already have to split up your inheritance 3 ways with my 2 brothers. And I just did not want that to happen. So obviously it was time for Noah's wife to be ovulating. And Noah's ready, and they just happened to do this debacle with the wine and with those grapes, and then he fell down drunk, and Ham thought, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this situation with his own mother and going to have that 4th child, Canaan.
Yeah.
And that way he can get his inheritance. And there was talk, again, there was talks that he could have done a few things with Noah that was really got him upset. And castration is one of them, so that he would never have that 4th child. And you obviously, there's another couple of other stories, like we've seen it in the Bible, where Ham didn't really care that his father was naked and laying there like that. And of course, Shem and Japheth did. And they rushed in there, like it says in the Bible, to cover him, right?
Yeah, walked in backwards so they wouldn't see him.
Right, they look backwards, right? But it's, and then those type of things were respectful to your parents was very important back then. So again, all these things that happened to Noah there by Ham got him really sour. And it's funny because even Japheth, they say, there was a quote that I found that he had a little snicker about his father. A little snicker about him, just a little snicker about before he rushed in and looked backwards. And Noah found out about that. And that was enough to take out Japheth as far as having, the priestly duties and etc. So he was even upset with Japheth a little bit. And Japheth didn't exactly turn out the greatest either. He had battles and he had his stuff going on.
Yeah.
They got into paganism too. So
yes, they did.
None of the 3 sons were perfect, but I think that was a monumental time for at least a couple of them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot in there. And there's I've heard a lot of wide interpretations on the events surrounding the getting drunk and going into the tent. And I typically take a less extreme path, but then a lot of people I've seen go more of the direction you're seeing personally, but and whatever, it's here or there, because we really don't know. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a lot of strange stuff going on that we could definitely see in there that something is up. And no matter what happened, right? The thing that you can take away from that is that Ham was a jerk.
Yeah.
He was a total jerk. And, we just see this really harsh, what we would view as harsh punishment, but we also don't have like you said, the respect thing today. And there's a lot of thing about nakedness in the Bible, and how shameful that is for somebody to see you naked that is not your spouse, right? And first thing we see in the Garden of Eden, what is the first thing they realized? They realized they were naked. There's one of my wife's favorite passages is about God is instructing Moses in Exodus on how to go up the steps. Don't go up steps to get to my platform to speak or whatever, because people will basically be able to see up your your garment and see your bits. And it's basically what he's saying. And she laughs because that's exactly what it's saying, is see your private parts. I think some of the translations actually say private parts, which is kind of funny, but yeah, there's some interesting things in there about that.
Oh yeah. So, did you know? Go ahead.
No, please.
No, go ahead.
No, I was pretty much done. So feel free to hop in and say whatever you're going to say.
Did you know that another story revolves around Noah, that when he was leaving the ark, there was a lion there, and the lion maimed him and scraped them in the genitals. And that was the reason why he had a very difficult time having children after they left the ark.
Man.
So he thought again, in this drunken state, I don't want to get too technical, but he was trying to get ready to go in for his wife, and he just couldn't because he was drunk, and they weren't working very well. So that's another story that could have allowed Ham to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, and Graybeard, I'm not sure when Graybeard joined us. He made a comment right here. He said, "Where's all this extra information coming from?" So we're talking about a lot of extra biblical text today, man. There's a lot of writing that has been done by people diving into texts, and so a lot of the stuff we have said from the very onset, you're not going to find a lot of these in your Bible. They are coming from extra sources, numerous extra sources. So Brent's done a lot of research into a lot of the extra biblical texts. So that's
I can give him. Legends of the Jews is a great source, and it's like 4 or 5 volumes. So that's one that Louis Ginsburg did a lot of. He did a lot of research, and he got a lot of things into a story, made it into like a story form, and has a lot of these footnotes that talk about the different possibilities. Like,
I wonder if that's where they pulled the David's mom thing. I wonder if that's where they maybe pulled that from.
Could have been.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, but so. But yeah, Stacy, yes, he has done years of research on many sources. Yeah, thank you for answering, Stacy. Appreciate that. So yes,
hi Stacy. I know her. She's
do you? Oh,
yes.
There you go. He's calling in reinforcements, man. Here you go. So no, that's all good. So yes,
she's very smart too.
Gray, we preface this show and any of the shows that we do like this. This is all designed to dive into your Bible. Go read the extra biblical text, dive into your Bible, and see what God reveals to you. Because we can't have every single thing written down in the Bible. It's not possible. So we have to, for our 2025 knowledge, when we look back at this stuff, we do not have the firsthand account like they had in a lot of, very close lineage to these events. So we have to figure out on our own through some of the extra biblical texts what the details are. So,
yeah. Now, one thing that I heard that's in the Bible is where Noah was cursing Canaan, right?
Yeah.
And a servant shall he be to his brothers, right? We're talking about his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about it, his brothers are not Shem and Japheth.
Mm-hmm.
But if Ham was the father and his mother was right, then they would have been technically brothers.
And that's an interesting point.
So that is in the Bible, but that leads one to ponder, okay, why would he say, cursed shall he be to his brothers? If there wasn't some hanky-panky like that with Ham trying to actually make him another brother.
Yeah, the whole cursing of Canaan in and of itself, again, no matter how you get there, is questionable in and of itself, because it's like, why wouldn't you punish Ham? He's the one that did this. So why would you turn the arrows on Canaan in this particular instance, which is always an interesting thing. So it's easy and it's interesting to draw some of the conclusions that you're talking about.
And again, common sense. I think Noah was so mad at Ham. Obviously, you're right. He didn't like Ham to begin with. I mean, he was upset with him in a lot of ways because of his acts. But I think he was upset with Canaan because Canaan just stole his ability to have that fourth child.
Yeah.
And I think it affected Canaan. Canaan was a bad person after a while too. I mean, he did a lot of, let's say, raunchy things that research shows in Egypt when he was out in that way. So,
yeah, well, the whole promised land thing, he basically stole the land. I mean, we've gotten into that several times in the show. I won't go into that.
I will say, kind of put some levity in with this.
We had a castration joke earlier. That kind of
sometimes when
can't work those in all the time.
When I would get upset, I would just ban something from everybody. All my kids.
Oh, so one of them would do something wrong, and it's like,
no more drinks in the movies.
Yeah, that happens.
I could understand that as a parent.
That does happen. Yeah, that does happen. Yeah, you can see though, like, Canaan wound up being a bad seed too, man. If you dig in there and you find out some stuff, you put two and two together. And again, the whole promised land thing, somebody may hear that and go, oh, well, how do you get there? And like, you can actually get there in the Bible, because if you look at, well, I guess that's kind of not true. Ultimately though, you can see that the land that they're going into was actually given to, goes back to Shem, I believe. Yep. And because Abraham was a descendant of Shem. and you can kind of put it together in the Bible, but you really got to like look close, and you got to like compare things that are kind of obscure and off beaten path a little bit. But once you get in there, and you can actually do that, and you can start to put two and two together. So Promised Land takes on a whole new meaning at that point. And it seems like, and I don't know what you found in your research, but it seems to me as I was digging in there that I keep using the term, the train starts to come off the tracks before we even get to Nimrod with the three brothers after Noah dies, because it's all like they're promising him and he's kind of the glue and he holds everything together. And then after he dies is when things really start to go sideways. Is that kind of what you kind of came to as well, or did you find something different?
Yes, I think it happened. And again, everybody has their own research.
Sure.
I think, according to my research, I think that it was getting bad even before he died. And there's some other stories that really kind of just go off the rails, like actually Cush going even back to Noah and saying, "Please harbor me. I'm getting kicked out of my old way," and Noah took him in. All these, there's a lot of weird things, but it was even getting bad around the time of just after the Tower of Babel, and Semiramis and Nimrod were just getting popular in Babylon and in Egypt. And then they had Shem taking it upon himself to raise an army with his son to go after and chase after them and take them out, because they were just, they knew. Remember we talked about the mark, some people were just not falling for that, like Shem. And Shem was a huge figure back then, and I believe, because he was a father, obviously patriarch, but he did a lot of chasing for these other pagan patriarchs, and he wanted them dead.
Yeah.
And he wanted to chase them out of there. So the battle was going on for a while. And I believe you even hear about that in mythology, because you hear about the Titans. And I believe that was actually remnants of, or their interpretation of who Shem was and his family, because they were called Titans because they were trying to disrupt the Olympians, which were, of course, it was the pagan followers that they're being chased around. It's quite a story.
It is. Yeah.
And I think it's the travels of Noah into Europe is one of the sources that I get a lot of that out of.
Yeah.
And Ananias is another one. And it's another source that you might want to check out if you're interested in what happened after those battles and such after the flood.
Yeah. So you kind of had mentioned earlier that, Nimrod had become kind of the viceroy to get everything under control, but that it sounds like he just starts getting kind of big for his britches, and then, realizes that he has all this power. And
right.
Then where does the story kind of go from there? Like once he starts to get that in his head.
Let's see here. Let me just check it out here. I think the clothes, when he was wearing those clothes, that was another thing.
And you're talking about the garments that came from Adam.
The garments of Adam. Yeah, that was another thing that gave him, and they started to call him a mighty conqueror and a mighty hunter, because again, people felt safe with him because he was taking out lions, leopards, bears, whatever that was around there, and he was not afraid of them, especially with the clothes. Let's see.
Kind of like the golden fleece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I bet you a lot of that pagan mythology has a lot of these origins.
Yeah.
They're just, the thing about that, a lot of this different pagan beliefs and stuff, they talk the stories, and I bet you a lot of them come back to the same people continually. And a lot of them are just regurgitations of earlier people they turned into gods. Okay. But it's always from the opposite point of view. So you're not going to hear, they even they deify Noah too. They call him Janus, because Janus has two faces, and they think they said one face that was before the flood and one face was after the flood. So he was one of the people who actually made it through the flood. And that's what I believe. Again, they father Janus, because again, father Noah. So a lot of these gods is just because of the real stories in the Bible. But again, it's just paganized. It's just turned to make them look like the great ones and the righteous ones.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jasher, actually, I've noticed, is a very good book about Nimrod. I really, because when I went over this, like I said, I've written this book a few years ago, And I went back, and a lot of the quotes came from Josephus
Jasher. Oh,
and
yeah.
Jasher, and Philo. So I think I'm trying to look into okay, you know what? I think, okay, to answer your question, I think one of the people that actually turned Nimrod south was his father.
Yeah, he
was
said Cush. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was whispering in his ear the whole time to try to just say, you know, you don't need to go the way of God. You're strong enough, and the pride started to get the better of him. So I think those are some of the things that actually turned him south. And when we talked about getting, actual symbols of idols and stuff out there rather than actually an invisible God. So God was just starting to get left behind and left into the dusty corner. And that's what happened. Simple pride.
Yep. Yeah. I'm going to take a little detour real quick because I just want to answer a question, and then we're going to answer this real quick.
I've
come right back. I pulled this up. So Susan, you asked a question. You said concerning nakedness, didn't David dance naked in the streets at his coronation? And I think what you're referring to is 2 Samuel 6. He did not dance naked. Here's actually what it says in that particular passage, just to read it really quick. And again, this is 2 Samuel 6. Verse 14, and David danced before the Lord with all his might, and David was wearing a linen ephod. So no, he was not.
And it was when they brought the ark into the city.
Yeah, he's basically dancing and in merriment. And this actually is the well, I won't ruin the show for you. You can go read. I guess you can go read the Bible and ruin the show for yourself. So as far as what's going to happen next, but coming back to this, how do we get from Nimrod, to the Tower of Babel? Like, what was in essence the idea and the purpose behind the true purpose behind the Tower of Babel, as you have found in your research?
It's simply man's pride, for one thing. That was okay. I believe, according to the research, that actually Babylon, why hence the name Mystery Babylon, and some of the things that I've written about it. It's a system that was popularized, that begun at the city of Babel, pretty much at Babylon. And I believe that Cain was one of the ones who actually helped to build the original Babylon. Okay. Yeah. After the flood, again, when we got Nimrod becoming a little bit corrupt and starting to think that he was the God, because how, as a young man, and you have all this might, and you have the clothes of Adam, and you have all these people worshiping you practically, how easy it is for a person to fall for that pride, right? So now, as time went on, he started to say things like, maybe this God is an oppressive God. I will set you free. And the people, another thing the people did not want to do, they did not want to separate. Like I was saying, God wanted them to separate, and Noah was trying to get them to go out in their own nations. But the people, again, it's either one or the other, one way or the other. And people wanted to unite. They didn't want to separate. That was their big thought now. It's let's all come together. Let's come together under Nimrod. And again, thanks to Cush and the teachings, basically, I believe after a while, it became where human pride and human interpretations as absolute authority was circumventing everything that God had and God wanted to set out for the people after the flood. So that's basically, it's almost like a humanistic way of looking at the world now, where we can make our own gods. We are God inside, where we can make these best decisions. So the people got really upset after a while. And like I said, Babylon is the start before the flood, and Nimrod took it upon himself to say, you know what, I'm going to make this in honor of Cain. I'm going to make this the post-flood city, and I'm going to even build a tower, because we talk about earth, God has his holy mountain, right? He has his holy mountain where he comes out. And Nimrod thought, okay, well, let's build our own mountain, a mountain of man. This God that's oppressing us and killed our ancestors, we're going to build something high enough, because if he ever sends a flood again, we'll be high, we'll survive it. And we're actually going to put priests up there and fight God. And there's stories where they wanted to just go up there and shoot arrows up into the heavens and try to shoot and attack God. I mean, these people got so vile after a while. It was just, it's amazing, because it was only 100 or 150 years after the flood, and they just became very angry and vile, and something and someone was feeding them this.
Yeah.
I have in Philo, I have a little quote if I can read it here real quick.
Fire away, please.
It says, as translated in the Bible, it only says, quote, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the name Nimrod, being interpreted, means desertion. Moses calls the seat of Nimrod's kingdom Babylon, and the interpretation of the word Babylon is change, a thing nearly akin to desertion. The name, too, being akin to the name and the one action to the other, for the first step of every deserter is a change and alteration of the mind. Mm-hmm. And that was Philo. And basically, I think what they're talking about here is Nimrod was the change and Babylon was the symbol of this change.
Yeah. And just for anyone who wants to go back and read this, there's a couple things that I'm going to get to. And first of all, Stacy, thank you for answering Maurice's question there as far as who actually killed Nimrod. There's a lot of different interpretations of that just off to the side. Several different versions of that, if you will, of who actually killed Nimrod. So hard to say which one's actually right, but
I lean towards Esau. Yeah,
you typically lean towards Esau, and actually the Stacy actually answered Esau as well. And I know our friend Justin actually wrote a really great book from Prometheus Lens. So if you check out Justin Doc Brown's book on the Epic of Esau, you can actually find out. He's done a really good dive into that. But this is actually from Genesis 10, what we're getting into now. And just to read a little bit of the background here, this is getting into the lineage of Ham and Cush and all that, Egypt. The sons of Ham, and I'm reading from Genesis chapter 10, verse 6. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Sabteca.
Can you repeat that?
No. The sons of Rama were Sheba and Dedan. Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. Now, one of the things, too, I'll give you a little tip when you read your Bible. If we're going through lineage like this, and then all of a sudden we have a deviation in language and we start zeroing in on somebody, they're important. So Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man. If you read the Septuagint version of this, it says that he was a giant. It actually uses the term giant. It doesn't mince words here. It doesn't say mighty man. It cuts right through the crap and says that he was a giant. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it says, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar, which we know is the plain of Shinar. And then we get into Assyria. He built Nineveh, which ultimately the Assyrians and the Babylonians wind up becoming enemies as we go down the line through history. And we actually see the Assyrians used to take the northern kingdom as we move forward in time. And then the Babylonians are used to take the southern kingdom as we go forward in time as well. Now, I'm going to skip over to Genesis 11 because that is where we see the Tower of Babel event. And if you are thinking that, it doesn't say in the Bible that the whole purpose of this was to get high enough or to make it so that they could survive the flood, I'm going to throw this in here because this is a very interesting thing that oftentimes, too, we don't understand and we just glaze right past and we don't understand what this is. But it's in here and it's in here for a reason. I'm going to pick up right in verse 1. So Genesis 11, verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. As people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there, which we just read back in the last chapter. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Bitumen is used a few times in the Bible. When you actually go look up what bitumen is modern day asphalt. And what do we know about modern day asphalt? It's waterproof.
Waterproof, right? There you go. Yeah.
So this is, and again, it's described in here for a very specific reason. And you have to kind of read between the lines, and some of these extra biblical texts actually help kind of develop that story a little bit. But they were doing this for exactly what Brett just said. The whole purpose of this is we're thumbing our nose at God. We can be better and mightier than him. And we know the trick got pulled last time was to flood us on out of this joint world. We're going to trick old God, and he ain't going to pull that again on us. So that's why they're doing what they're doing. So I just wanted to read that to kind of help emphasize.
Good. Yeah, very good. I didn't think about that. I always, iron sharpens iron, and I always like to hear new things and bounce off of people. And that's good. That's a good one. That makes sense. It makes sense. It seems to support that too.
There was something else. Any construction from this point on, typically of any size at all, they would use bitumen. So bitumen is very old. Brick and mortar and bitumen is very, very old technology.
It wasn't just, the plane, so it's flat. So they had plenty of space, and the foundation's between the estimate was 100 to 200 miles in diameter.
Huge.
Yeah, and it was like about 8,000 feet tall.
Something. And a lot of people say, and I did some research on this too. Just sorry, a side note, because a lot of people were like, well, that's not possible because they wouldn't have been able to breathe while they were building it. Ha! That's not true. And here's why. Because where they are, that whole area there, which is in Iraq, I think modern day Iraq, I do believe, that whole area there where they think that they have built this thing is actually several, like it's way below sea level.
Yeah.
So it's kind of way down below sea level.
Bowl.
Yeah, like in a bowl, like a huge bowl, because you're going to have the huge flat spots. But yeah, so they could build this thing that high and still be able to breathe.
Yeah.
Naturally, I mean, you'd be hard, but you're not going to need equipment, basically, like modern day mountain climbing or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas like, Everest is like what, at 23,000 feet tall or something like that. And I think it sits above sea level. So just to comparatively, I could be off on that one, but you get the gist.
Notice when you read the Bible about Nimrod, and I believe when they talked about Nimrod himself, I believe they said something like he was a mighty hunter 3 times.
Yeah.
I think
a mighty hunter before the Lord.
Right, before the Lord. And I think that symbolizes when you hear them talking about something or someone 3 times in a row, he's like thrice great. In other words, he was massive. He's like one of the greatest so-and-so over whatever he did. So I think when you hear about it mentioned 3 times like that, that's what that means, I believe.
Okay. Do you think Nimrod and Gilgamesh are the same person?
I tend to incline more, because he did go seek out Noah, right, to find out about immortal life. So it's quite possibly that he could be. I had a feeling, and then I left it as that. I didn't research a ton on that, but I have an inkling that he probably would be the good candidate for.
I do too. I mean, I think he's the man of many names. I mean,
Yeah.
And just for funsies, I pulled the Septuagint up just so you guys know that I'm not full of it, because I have a copy. And if you want to get a copy, then head over to our fans page, ask for access, and you'll get in there and you'll be able to get a PDF copy for yourself. Reading from Genesis 10, I'm going to pick up in, I'll pick up in verse 8, pretty much where I picked up before. And Cuss, it's pronounced Cuss in here, but it's Cush, however you want to pronounce it. Begat Nimrod is how it says in here, but Nimrod.
Yeah, with a B.
Yep. He began to be a giant upon the earth, which is an interesting phrase because it says he began to be a giant upon the earth. He was a giant hunter before the Lord. Therefore, they say, as Nimrod, the giant hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babylon, and then it goes on through pretty much the same thing we see before. Yeah. I like the Septuagint. It doesn't water it down for you.
Cool. Yeah, again, the giant thing, you have to, in my opinion, again, according to the research, sometimes things are symbolized and they're used in symbolism. So I think he was a giant, in my opinion, but they said Noah was a giant too in some pagan accounts and mythology and some of these ancient accounts that we read. So I believe also that we have to kind of use a little common sense, in my opinion, that when they talk about giants, sometimes they could mean that they were just
in stature.
They were just very influential.
Physical stature, but yes. That.
Right. I mean, I don't think everybody that we turned around, like Adam, some people think that Adam was a giant, or he had, and they say, oh, he's so-and-so else tall, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think necessarily that he could have been actually a giant of stature. Maybe he was a giant in a way that he was very influential, knowledgeable, and he was a very well-respected person, and he was close to God. When they say, oh, he was very tall, could that have been that he was very close to the heavens and close to communicating with God and having a lot of power with the spiritual side?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to interpret it, in my opinion, like that.
Yeah, you could. I think Noah was taller. I think a lot of the people pre-flood. I think some of these guys post-flood too. Like I think Ham, Shem, Japheth, they were probably bigger guys just because it seems to be too, and this is just scientific. And this is actually a good talk we actually had with Hovind. Yeah. Because he's really good with this. Take it with what you will with what you think about Kent, but he's got his knowledge when it comes to the two ends of the Bible. They have found a lot of these fossilized tree sap that has oxygen that they believe was probably around before the flood. And when they go in and they look at the oxygen content of the bubbles inside of the fossilized tree sap, it's much, much higher than what we have now. And we know that when the oxygen content gets higher, right, and the temperate climates is, much more tropical and temperate than what we have a lot of places in the world now, things get large. Yeah. So they're fairly confident that they were probably bigger. Yeah. So I don't know. It's one of those where we can speculate.
You can imagine how much longer people would live and how much healthier they would be too, and stronger, right?
Yeah. And that's exactly why they're living that long, is because, first of all, we were designed to, and then the Bible actually, no, I think it's actually the book of Jubilee says this, that Noah actually died. Because we read the account in Genesis and it says, if you eat of the fruit of the tree, surely that day you will die. Right. It says that day you will die, I believe is how it's phrased, or something similar to that. And yet we read the account and we're like, well, he didn't die. And what it actually says in the book of Jubilees is it says that he actually did die because 1,000 days, one day is 1,000 days to the Lord. So it says he died when he was 960 or something like that. And that's actually, he did not fulfill his 1,000 days. He died on what would be a Lord's day.
Yeah.
930.
Yeah.
930 years.
930. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. That makes sense. Because again, that's reading it with a possible symbolism or metaphor or something, kind of reading into the lines a little bit, and that makes total sense. If you think about it, and or else he could have already, his body was now on the way to dying. So in other words, he was no longer what he was before. He was mortal, and he was on his way to death.
Yeah, it's kind of a head bender when you sit around and you think what things had to be like for us physically, because we have these decaying, graying, aging, painful meat sacks that just gets harder to sleep every night, and joints ache and all these fun things, and with diseases and all that stuff. And what it would have been like before to be at our age, right? We're all relatively close in age. We would have been like babies, like babies, like toddlers at best. Yeah, in the grand scheme of time, we'd still be living. I mean, it'd be fantastic. I mean, people are having kids when they're however many 100 years old, and it's crazy mind bend to think, and like, what was a world before decay like? What would the world be like before decay? It's a head tripper to think about. But
thorns and thistles.
I know, right? Exactly. How much we have to toil to produce food. Thorns and thistles the ground will produce for you, and you're going to have to toil for your food. So, Susan, thank you very much for telling everybody to hit the like button, helping the algorithm. That does help very much. So, if you guys would do that, that would be fantastic. Randy L asked a question here. Brett, I'm going to throw it up on the screen, and you can see here. Hi, Brett. How many people were on the earth at the time of Nimrod? This is from Randy and Nancy. Do you know these two?
I do.
They're writing as though they know you.
Yeah, they're a couple of good friends too. Very, very wonderful people.
Love it.
You can only imagine. One thing I do know, I don't know how many, and I couldn't make a guess because I'm not really good at that type of predictions, statistics, etc. But one thing that I did learn is after the flood, for a while, I guess God tried to allow a lot of people to have twins to accelerate the population quickly. That's why, and I guess back when Adam and Eve at the beginning of the garden too, there were twins too that were born quickly, and that's why I think Cain and Abel were twins. In my opinion, they came out around the same time because they did sacrifices at the same day, right? Mm-hmm. So I think when you become a certain age, you do certain sacrifices, and I believe that's why they did it on the same day when Cain killed him. But I think they had twins to explode the population, not too much, but just enough to keep it keep it going after the flood. So I don't know how many total, but I believe that actually there was enough to have enough people to jump and try to build a tower.
Be fruitful and multiply.
That's an interesting thought.
The other thought I had when he was saying that is how many things we have in like lore of stories, not necessarily biblical, but just other stories where it always revolves around twins.
Yeah.
And anytime you have that, like you got a minotaur, you got some kind of wacky medieval type story or whatever, that stuff's way older than that.
Yeah.
It's coming from somewhere that's older than that, because there's nothing new under the sun. Solomon told us this, right?
Yeah.
And everything is stolen and repackaged, repurposed,
right.
regurgitated. I guess the greatest form of flattery, right? So
yeah, and you have Jacob and Esau. I mean, I think the twins often are significant, and you hear that.
Yeah, there you go.
Nimrod might have been a twin, but I'm not sure if he actually took out his brother.
Maybe it was
or whatever, but I don't
Gilgamesh.
know.
Yeah.
Huh?
Maybe it was Gilgamesh.
There you go.
There you go. Could have been.
Yeah, that's one I think. Because Justin, we talked to him and he gets into that.
Yeah.
The whole Nimrod killing or Esau killing Nimrod,
which it makes.
And then he comes back and he's like, "I'm going to die anyway." Yeah,
you can have my birthright for the soup.
You can have it. Yeah.
You heard about the significance of that, right? Or did you?
The soup?
About the soup?
I think maybe Justin got into it, but go ahead.
The lentil soup supposedly is Jacob was mourning the death of Abraham at that time, and they ate lentil soup, red lentil soup at a death. So that's another thing that probably set Esau on a bad path, because he didn't even care that his grandfather had died.
Dead.
Right? He didn't even care at that time. He was just hungry, and he would rather just eat the soup and give up his birthright than actually show a little bit of respect for an elder again, like Noah.
Well, there's a lot more to that story. Again, if it's going into detail, then it means something. Yeah, and again, if he's thinking he's worried about his own skin, right? Is that what you're going?
Well, and I said God hated Esau.
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole thing's interesting because again, you have him clutching the heel, right? We have the whole clutching of the heel, just as we see in Genesis. There's a lot of parallels that are being drawn for a very specific reason. And again, if it's getting into that much specifics in the Bible, it's really important.
I think so. I think it's extremely important.
It's like, how would Heiser say, if it's weird, it's important?
Yes.
So you got Mike Heiser.
I think a couple of the most important people, like in that book I sent you, Kyle, the first one, I think one of the very important but underrated people is Abel in the stories that we see, because Abel was a good person, but not necessarily of the best seed. Okay, I do hold that he was probably a certain serpent seed, just like Cain. I believe that because there are some sources that point to that. Okay,
interesting.
Another very important person in understanding the enemy and understanding a lot of these whole Bible stories is Esau. And again, it's kind of the same thing. He had everything going for him in his bloodlines genetically. He was grandson of Abraham and then Isaac, and then so he was right along with Jacob, with Israel. But I believe there's spiritual corruption in him, not necessarily physical. So you had Abel, a very important person, because he had all the negative things going for him as far as bloodline, as far as direction. If he's even a seed of the serpent, how good is that going to make you possibly be a good person? But he chose to follow God, and he chose to take those right paths. So that's significance. He had everything going against him, but he chose to go the right way. But then you have Esau, who on the other extreme had everything going for him. He had all the bloodline in the world, everything. All he had to do was just, again, not marry these pagan wives, follow God. But he chose spiritually the wrong path. And he led a lot of people down that wrong path as Edomite descendants. So that's the other thing that's like the other contrary that you want to think about, is that he had everything, but he spiritually chose the wrong path. So it's all up to a person's choice. They can make the choice. They can have all the negative things and they can choose God, or they can have all the things going for you and still choose the other side.
Yeah, that's right, man.
And the enemy.
I can never hear that story anymore without having Willie Nelson pop in my head. Is it Willie Nelson? Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys.
Yes, Willie and Waylon.
Willie and Waylon, there you go. But I always change it to Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to marry Canaanite women. Because he's like, all of the moms are telling him, don't marry Canaanite women, don't marry Canaanite women, don't marry Canaanite women. And it's like the first thing he does is like, oh my God, hey mom, you want to meet my wife? She's a Canaanite.
Yeah.
You should have told him not to marry Jewish women. He's reverse psychology on him. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, he'll do the opposite, right? Just try to tell him the opposite, or tell him not to do, and he'll do the opposite. He'll be on the right path.
Right, exactly. This is going to be an offshoot question because I just want to get your take, and we're going to jump all the way to modern day because I know what my take is. I just want to see what your take is. The whole idea of the Tower of Babel is human beings are obviously working together, and they're getting real big for their britches, and they're beginning to accomplish things that are pretty insane and astronomical of what they're able to do, like physically. I mean, like, you got to think, to be able to build this tower, however big it was high enough where it got God's attention, right? And it was monumental enough for that to happen. God comes along, destroys the tower. I think it's in Jubilees. God actually causes a wind to blow it down, I think is what it was, but there's probably different accounts out there. Either way, we destroy it. We scatter the people. We confound the language. Or confound the language, then scatter the people, however you want to look at it. And here we go, however many thousand years later, and it seems like we're kind of back on that path again, where we're starting to do these things, like now we've got flipping dire wolves running around again. What's next? It's like we're doing Jurassic Park for real. And it just feels like I am used to saying, or fond of saying, that it feels like all of the things that we're getting into these days, genetic manipulation, transhumanism, and it just feels like this is kind of like our modern Tower of Babel. And I don't know how much we have left. Do you see the parallels there in yourself to some of the things we have going on?
That's why I named the second volume the Tower of Babel, because exactly what you're saying, I believe that there is a parallel to then to now of the Tower of Babel. And if you give me a minute, I'll explain to it.
Yeah, please. So
I got an interesting story. We talked about, the hate and for God and all the viciousness that these people were, their intents were doing. And I got a kind of an interesting take here, and I want to read it to you real quick if it's okay. And then I'll share my parallel from then to today. This is actually in a book called Pseudo-Philo. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's one of those obscure ancient texts, whatever.
Yeah, I have.
It's called Pseudo-Philo, and it says 6:2, and it says, "And they said everyone to his neighbor, let us take bricks, and let us each one write our names upon the bricks, and burn them with fire, and that which is thoroughly burned shall be mortar, for mortar and brick." Now, the interesting part about it here is these people were so arrogant, and they wanted this tower to strike out at God so bad that they each wrote and inscribed their own name in a brick. Okay, so imagine the hate and etc. that they were bringing. Okay, but if you think about it nowadays, okay, what was the Tower of Babel back then? It was a unification of people, right, coming together in defiance of God, because God wanted them, not that he wanted them to be to divide and conquer and to be alone by themselves out in the middle. He wanted them people to just kind of have stand on their own 2 feet and be able to work well in whatever environment they came in and be good neighbors and not, squabble and live so close. And he wanted them just to be able to have rugged individualism enough so they can be good people on this earth while on this earth. Okay. But of course, they went the opposite direction. They wanted to unify. They wanted to come in together, right? We see that today. We see exactly that same thing coming today, where people, instead of, being able to walk on each one's own 2 feet and being strong in the world that they're in, they're chosen to be, let's be all communal. Let's get some kind of communist communal rhetoric going where we all become one. And the interesting thing you want to think about is these bricks. What do they call those cell phones when they first came out? Remember, years and years and years? They call them bricks because they were big and heavy and they look like a brick. But the funny thing is, each brick has somebody's name on it, right? It's attributed to somebody, right? And we all seem to have our own bricks now, whether they be small now, but we all seem to have our own bricks. And the communication process, we're all uniting once again. You can call somebody in Australia right now if I wanted to. So as we don't have to come physically together, we're bringing our Tower of Babel back together in this whole age the same way, but it's in a different way, but it's the same exact thing. Everybody's uniting. And again, they're crowding out anything that has to do with God again, because you have to be politically correct and secular. And that's basically what I believe is the new Tower of Babel, is this unification once again through all this technology that you've mentioned, Kyle.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we got CERN trying to rip portals open to other dimensions, and Bones Jones here. I'll throw his comment up. Yeah, man, you're absolutely right. The names they chose for the direwolves were the founding twins of Rome.
Wonderful.
Here we go, twins again. Romulus and Remus are the names of the and then they've got a female direwolf, which they've named Khaleesi, but they're planning on not breeding them, according to what they say. We're just going to let them roam free on 2,000 acres of land, and I'm sure that won't result in breeding.
Nature take its course.
Right, just like Jurassic Park, I think. Right. The fences are down. This is an interesting comment. I want to throw this up here from Stacy. She had paused, but she kind of heard our talks about the oxygen. She said she's about 8 minutes behind. She had to pause a few times. But in regard to the oxygen being higher, I always wondered if that's why we had non-functional auricles in our hearts. I did not know this. And then she went on to say that they used to be functional for extra blood when the oxygen was different. Did you ever heard that before?
No,
I had never heard that before. So
she is very well versed in medical terminology and stuff. She works in that field, so that's probably. Well, I didn't know that either, Stacy. That's very good.
Yeah. See, and like you said, iron sharpens iron. Even from the comments, you're sharpening iron over there. That's awesome stuff. And then Randy had another comment. We'll probably use this as our last to dive into for the day because we gotta save some stuff for later, and there needs to be a later. There's a lot more we can get into. Thanks, Brett. Nancy wondering who you would relate Nimrod to today in present time. We'll have fun fielding that one.
The Antichrist would be like a perfect parallel from then to now, if you think about it. I mean, relating to him, I couldn't think of anything else. He would, again, when I hear that word anti, you have to kind of, in my opinion, in my research, you have to kind of understand what the word anti really, really stands for. Okay. Because people think, and this is in my last, my third volume too, we have to think about what anti means. Because when you think about it, you think, oh, it's someone evil. It's a, horrible, he hates Christ, etc. Not necessarily. Because I even looked up a couple definitions of anti, and it actually, I'm just going to read them off here real quick. It says, of the same kind, but situated opposite, exerting energy in the opposite direction or pursuing an opposite policy. It's interesting. And then the other definition called in the Free Dictionary, identical to in form or function, but lacking, opposite, or contrary in essential respects. So if we think about that, okay, this person who's antichrist nowadays, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be out there hating God. They're going to be acting like Christ, like God. They're going to be sounding compassionate. They're going to be sounding wonderful. They're going to be sounding nice. And somebody would be attracted to, but they're just a little different. They're not quite there with God. And maybe for political reasons, they have to not be, they can't say that they like God, and they can't, they have to be humanist. They have to use secular humanism, but still they're going to be wonderful, nice. So that's what we see a lot today. We see people acting like antichrist. Okay. So again, Nimrod was one person that was, at first, he was a viceroy of God. Remember, he did a lot of the things that God wanted him to do. He would fight for God. He would keep the people safe. And as obviously in Daniel, we hear about, he would bring peace, right? And peace, some of the things he would know in it. But that's one thing we have to see when we're looking for Antichrist or something like that. We have to see that they come on that platform. They don't come as I'm a Satanist. They don't come as that type of thing, but they come as very nice, very compassionate, and someone that you would just think would be a Christ-like.
Interesting. Was it you thinking of the passage of John?
Yeah.
Is it John where he says that basically anybody that's not anyone that's against Christ is antichrist, basically? Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting passage.
What was it?
There's a passage in John. Is it the Gospel of John? I think it's Gospel of John.
No.
Is it First John?
Yeah.
One of the Johns. Look up one of the Johns.
First John, I think.
Yeah, First John, where it talks about anyone who is basically opposed to Christ in some form or fashion is antichrist. But then again, you've got a lot of translations in there that who knows what we've run.
Well, that's okay. I mean, if you're not going to be godly, obviously you're going to be opposed to him in one way or another, right? So, I mean, it's almost like it's a humanist interpretation of doing it your own way, right? Because God has these absolute things he wants followed and he wants understood, and he wants to be treated like God. But if people are going to choose to just do something a little bit alternate, a little bit different, that's still not following God or following Christ. It's still a different way.
Yeah, for sure, man. Wow, we've delved into a lot today.
Yes.
There's some comments over here. I'm not going to get into all of them because I'm not sure why I'm being accused of pretending about anything. I'm not pretending. I was asking a question earlier of who the person was referring to. So it seems like I've made Dr. Nonagon very angry. So that's okay. Doctor, I'm not sure what I did to upset you, but hey, I'm not trying to pretend. But anyway, Brett, we have delved into the deep end, man, and we've had some great talks, dude. We need to have you back to dive in some more. There's a ton more.
Good.
There's a ton more.
I would like to. I appreciate it, guys. Yeah, I would really, really like to. And again, iron sharpens iron, and I like to go back and forth with you guys because I'm always good to learn things too from you and everybody else that we talk about and is in the chat too.
Yeah, man, for sure. The chat's been great today, man. It's been fantastic. So I wanted to throw this up there again. If you are interested in learning more about Brett, okay, you can actually head to his website right here on your screen, mysterybabylon.com, mysterybabylon.com. And while you are over there, I believe you can get in all kinds of stuff over here. And then you can actually go up and you can actually get all of his books over there. You can dig into his research. He's got media, and you can find out all about him over there and all of the different volumes that he has. You can also head to Sacred Word Publishing. I think it's sacredwordpublishing.com.
.com. Yes, sir.
Yeah, sacredwordpublishing.com, which is Zen's company that he runs, where you actually publish through him. You can get those over there. And then we will actually have he will have his own guest tab on when we actually come out with the normal edited podcast release. We'll make sure that we actually get Brett a guest tab on there, and we will have all of his books linked on there too. And he'll have a bio, and we'll link all of his link to his website right here as well. So I just want to share that with everyone. So mysterybabylon.com to find out more. And I will come up here and I will close this off, and then that way we can see each other. There we go, full screen. So thanks, dude, man. It was great having you on, brother.
Good. Enjoyed it.
That's great talking to you guys, and I love to get in these conversations. And again, all I ask is an open mind, and you guys have it. But I back almost like about 97% of what I put in there, even though they sound a little crazy, like the Mark of Cain. I try to find something to back it somewhere, like an ancient text or something. So it's in there. So if you just let me know, or if anybody wants to let me know, send me an email or something. I'll show you, or I'll give you the information of where I found something.
Awesome. Well, hang tight, dude. We'll close everything off here, and you just hang tight. And then when we get offline, we'll pray together, and we'll send you off proper. So,
good.
All right,
Thank
man.
you.
With that, we will bid you all adieu until next time on The Forum.